We are here with Greg Brooks and Simon Lupton, and it's been a book called Freddie Mercury, A Life in His Own Words, and I'm just going to throw this out to either one who wants to answer it. Freddie's been dead a long time. Why write about him now?
Simon?
That's a very good question.
Freddie's been dead since 1991, and I'm thinking, why now did you put together this book?
I say that Freddie is generally always worth returning to at any point because he said so many things and did so many interesting things in his life. And then when he spoke about them, he always offered it in such an interesting way with a particular slant and in his own style, inimitable way. So reading Freddie's words at any time is worth doing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I would say.
Yeah, I'm just curious. How did the book come together? How did you guys collaborate? And give me a little bit of a starting point and how it went from there.
Yeah, well, Greg and I have been working together for a number of years on various different Queen-related projects, DVDs and documentaries and so forth. So we got to know each other pretty well, and through both our work, we have access to this incredible archive that Queen have amassed over what is now coming up to years of existing. And we were conscious that there were lots of interviews with Freddie that he'd given over the course of the 20 years that he was in the band. And much of the stuff that he said had either not really been heard or read since the time, or in some cases never released at all. And we just felt there was such a wealth of material that really peeled back the layers of who Freddie was and his opinions and outlooks on life, that we felt very strongly that was something that people would be interested in, because he is such an enigma. He is such an extraordinary, iconic figure. And so we were chatting about it, and we just thought, well, there's an opportunity here to sort of put together almost Freddie's autobiography, if you like, with him just talking about his life, his experiences, his beliefs and thoughts. And if he'd written, I mean, Greg summed it up perfectly. He said that if Freddie had written his autobiography, he would never write it himself. He would have sat down with someone, he would have been interviewed, and then that person would have gone away and written it. And so what we're doing is kind of taking that source material, but actually allowing him completely unhindered to sort of say what he wanted to say without us adding anything to it or interpreting it. We let the reader do that.
All right.
And so we ended up with this book.
Sounds great. I'm just curious, gentlemen, what song was it that got you guys into being interested in Queen? I'll give you my example. I was working at a gas station back in 1973, listening to my AM radio station, and all of a sudden on the radio came this song called Liar. And I was like, oh, my God, who are these people? And so I went out and bought the very first Queen album, Queen 1, I think in 1973. And I must admit, as a guy who was 17 at the time, it was pretty obvious to me as an adolescent at the time that Freddie was gay. I mean, you could just see the way he dressed and all of that kind of stuff. Maybe I'm making a stereotypical observation here, but the thing about it is, me being 17 years old and growing up in the Midwest, I didn't care. The music was great, you know?
No, I completely agree with you. Speaking for myself, when I was 9 years old and Bohemian Rhapsody was in the charts, my sister, who's a few years older than me, she was certainly playing Bohemian Rhapsody, and she loved that song and Killer Queen. But then a couple of years later, in '76, I was on holiday in the south of France, and I heard there was a jukebox in the room, and there were some Queen singles, Seven Seas of Rhye, Killer Queen, which I'd heard. So I wanted to hear the B-sides,
right? To
see, just out of interest. So I listened to Flick of the Wrist and the See What a Fool I've Been, the B-side of Seven Seas, and also Somebody to Love was on the jukebox, and White Man is the B-side.
Right.
And I figured that if this group's B-sides were as staggeringly good as that, then what would the other stuff be. So I stayed in that room most of the afternoon until I ran out of small change, listening over and over to those 3 songs, and that's really how I got it. That was the start.
It's amazing. It's amazing the catalog that Queen has that nobody has really heard of, and that first Queen album, I've got to tell you, is still on my CD player today. Now, let me ask you, gentlemen, if we have some Queen fans listening, and I know we do, and I'll let each one of you answer this question. If you are to read the book, what is the maybe 1 or 2 things that a reader would take away from this book?
I think if you're reading this book, then what you're going to see is a man who is incredibly intelligent. He's very witty, but he's also, provocative. He's controversial. And so I think what you will discover is there's so much more to the showman that you've seen on stage. There is very much a warm, caring, and generous man behind that as well, and that everything he did was considered. It was intelligently approached, and that was the same for the whole band. But Freddie absolutely knew what he was doing and what he wanted to achieve. And what I love about him most is that he says in the book is he said he never set himself a target. He never said there was somewhere he wanted to be, because he felt that if he ever got there, then the journey would be over. For him, it was about always striving for the next thing, always trying to be better than he was. And that's what drove him right up to the very end.
If I can add to that as well, can you still hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, one of the interesting things, I was going to say a lot of what Simon said, especially Freddie's intelligence and his wit and his sarcasm and the subtleties of things he says. If you read between the lines, he says an awful lot more than might first be apparent just from a short answer that he gives. Sometimes you need to see Freddie and his facial expressions when he delivers a sentence. It helps you to know that there's more in that than meets the eye. But often it does come off at you on the page. There's an awful lot on the page than just what first appears. I think that's the first thing. But the other interesting thing, reading the whole book, is because it covers 20 years, man and boy, if you like, you can see Freddie changing his mind on certain things. So, for example, when we gathered together all of his comments about his romantic interests and his love affair he felt about people, you can see his attitude changing as he gets older, as it does with everybody. Mm-hmm. So we're not covering Freddie just from 1984 or just from the first year. We're getting Freddie Mercury's opinions on the band members and touring and writing songs and friends and family and all manner of other things spanning 20 years. It's very interesting to see that sometimes he's very consistent and never changes his mind, is emphatic about some things. And on other things, he is open to change and changing his mind. And he comes across as very human and very normal for people that might think he's this subhuman or something, something bigger and better than a human. He is underneath that showmanship. He was just a person with ordinary thoughts and feelings and sensitivities. I think that definitely comes across.
The thing of it is that we have heard and kind of seen how Freddie was a pretty private person. How difficult, how hard was it for you to get enough information to complete a stature?
Well, it was actually, it wasn't that hard because, as Greg said, we're covering a 20-year period, and the thing with Freddie was he didn't have much faith in the journalistic profession, as it were.
Sure.
And so he found it very difficult and was very reluctant, particularly in the later years, to talk to journalists. However, if there was someone he trusted, then he would talk, and he would talk at great length and in a very open and refreshingly honest way. So we actually had a lot of material to play with and to look at, because once someone had earned his trust, then he'd be very open and wouldn't shy away from any question or any topic. Just the difficult thing was there weren't many people that he trusted, and rightly so, because, as you know, people have their own agendas,
sure.
and were very quick to stitch him up if they could.
Right.
I would add to that just like everybody else, if you caught Freddie on a bad day, you wouldn't get very much for your newspaper piece or your magazine article or TV interview, radio interview. If you caught him on a good day and you asked him good questions that you'd researched properly, then you would get a good answer and a good response. And people like David Wigg, for example, an English journalist who he was comfortable with and would happily tell him things that he wouldn't tell anybody else or many other people. From him came a whole wealth of stuff that I've never heard Freddie talking about, like how he'd like to be remembered when he's gone, and death generally, and his legacy, all those things. If you catch Freddie on a good day with the right person asking questions that they've thoroughly researched, then you're going to be surprised by what you get from him. But most of the time, he got people, he's doing 20 interviews, one after the other. It's becoming tedious and boring for him. He doesn't like being bored. He wants to do something more interesting. He's being asked the same questions over and over, and so we don't get a very good response. So Simon and I were very careful to go to all the right interview sources and gather all the very best.
So how long did it take for you guys to put this together?
Yes. Felt like years.
I think from when we started initially talking about the idea and then both of us going off and gathering, probably the best part of a year. Would you think, Simon?
Yes, yeah. The vast majority of the work was very much in the amassing everything, and we wanted to be sure we hadn't missed anything, that there was no stone left unturned in finding a gem from Freddie of an interview that he gave in so many different places.
Right.
So yeah, that was the hard bit, but once we got it, then the tricky thing is collating into what makes an enjoyable narrative read, but also, being careful not to leave anything out that could be revealing or interesting. But similarly, we didn't want to be too repetitive. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but really enjoyable.
And again, you touched on it just for a second. What was the biggest challenge in putting this all together for you guys?
I think we have to remember at the end of the day, we wanted people to sit and enjoy reading it. And obviously we're taking this from a myriad of sources. So it was about making it feel like a cohesive whole, that there was a progression and a story that you could follow. Because he doesn't just sit there and go, on this day we did that, and then the next day we did that.
Right.
But as Greg talked about earlier, you're witnessing the maturing of Freddie. There is a kind of chronological order to it when you read it. You sense that he's maturing and becoming more reflective as the book goes on. And that's what's most satisfying, I think, from our point of view, that we've managed to corral all these words into something that as you read through, you feel like you're growing and expanding with Freddie as he did.
The thing about it, it seems that, I've been in the radio business a long time, and it seems that Queen burned really, really bright, and then all of a sudden, right about 1981, 1982, they had themselves a little bit of a dry spell, and us at radio, when they gave us a song like Radio Gaga, it's like, this is a Midwest, what's going on here? But it seems to me that Queen is now much more popular now than they were back in like 1981, 1982. And I know the movie had a lot to do with it, but there couldn't have been an impetus for the movie unless Queen had retained their popularity. And each one of you guys, why do you think that this band is as popular today as it has been in any time in its formation or creation?
I think in most recent years, there's been a lot of Queen, not least, I wouldn't underestimate it. Suddenly we're getting Queen songs on commercial radio and commercial television. So you hear a lot of Queen music in advertising, which is reaching an awful lot more people than it ever used to.
Mm-hmm.
So young kids, if they didn't see Queen live, or they didn't see Freddie or Adam Lambert or the We Will Rock You musical, and before the film came along, suddenly they were hearing Radio Gaga and We Will Rock You not only at sporting venues and sporting arenas, but on their television in their living room. So I think that was pretty instrumental in recent years. But really, the main greatest hits, shall we call them, they've never gone away. They're never very far away from the media, or wherever you go, more or less, you encounter Queen music. It's never really gone away, and I think people of a certain age, like my age, have had children and brought Queen up on their favourite music, and now that generation are having their own children, and the same thing's happening. It just never goes away. And then the film happened, and the movie of last year, and it's all gone absolutely incredibly through the ceiling. You know, it's just reached a mammoth audience yet again. Just reminded people how brilliant some of that music is, and that it's worth checking out the albums as well, because it's not just Queen the singles. Queen have a whole lot more than just singles.
Oh, sure. And one of my favorite songs is a song that never gets played, and that's Tio Torretate. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful song. And, you know, just the catalog. And it's funny because I have grandchildren now. I've got an 18-year-old granddaughter, and her two favorite groups are the Beatles and Queen. Go figure, you know?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I'm incredibly envious of anyone who hasn't heard, you know, the Queen albums yet and is about to go on that journey, because what a journey they go on when you start ploughing back through all those great albums, and, you know, hearing those songs that we've talked about that aren't the hits but off the albums that we've talked about this evening that are, you know, are just brilliant. And yeah, I'm really envious of anyone who's yet to go on that journey. If any of your listeners haven't, go find them.
There's no question. Guys, did you reach out to any of the other members of the band? I know that the bass player, Roger, he's kind of a recluse now and all of that, but did you guys reach out to any of the other members? Were they called upon at all?
Well, generally speaking, Simon and I work for the band, and we generally, the Queen products and books and Queen projects are quite separate to the Freddie ones. So if we were doing anything to do with Queen, if we were doing a Queen in their own words book, the band would be very much all over every sentence. Mm-hmm. But with Freddie, we're kind of left alone to get on with it, not with any involvement from the band, and obviously not Freddie, but not from Brian and Roger in that instance. We kind of go back to Jim Beach, who's Queen and Freddie's manager, and who oversees the Freddie estate. And then via Jim, the projects get approved. The Freddie solo or Freddie-related projects go via that route, and we really have to send it to them without the usual Queen road. And that's what happened with the Freddie book. We didn't really have to run it past anyone other than the Freddie estate. And if they're happy and Freddie's family are happy, then we normally get approval. And can I just say, on the point that was raised a moment ago about all those great songs, I have to tell you there is a nice section within the book where Freddie goes through the various Queen albums and some of his other songs as well, and Simon and I wanted to collate those things so that people can read what Freddie had to say about We Are the Champions and It's a Hard Life, and of course Bohemian Rhapsody, which we gave an entire chapter to because he said so many brilliant things and insightful things and things you just never could predict. So we had to use them all. I think that's an entire chapter. I think we called it The Masterstroke, and Queen fans will know why we called it that. So there's a nice section where you can read what Freddie thought about all of those songs he wrote.
Guys, do you feel like that you maybe know Freddie almost personally now? You put in all of this work on this book. Do you guys feel like, geez, he's your friend now or something like that?
I think it certainly feels that way. Yes, I mean, when we were working on the book and you're reading these words, you can hear him in your head. Absolutely, and having now read so much about him, we certainly feel that we know probably more than we did when we first started, if that was possible. But I think what's so great about him is that a lot of what he said is open to interpretation, and I'm sure there are bits in the book that Greg and I interpret differently, and I think Freddie would have loved that, and I think he loved the air of mystery about him and the fact that not everything is explained and so forth, and I think there's still so much more we could find out about him if that were possible. What I wouldn't give to sit down with him and ask him all those questions, as I'm sure any Queen fan would. There'd be so much you'd want to ask,
right?
Which sadly we can't, but it's definitely been a joy sort of getting to know him better through this, but I think there's still much more.
It's probably worth adding to that, if I may, that the nicest comment that Simon and I have had about the book from anyone, it was important that we got good feedback from the fans generally, because we knew they would be our harshest critics, and they were, and they loved it generally speaking. But Roger Taylor apparently said to his personal assistant, who was reading some of the book to him, that it was just like having Freddie back in the room.
Nice.
Because of the humour and the wit and the beginning a sentence, not necessarily finishing it, changing his point halfway through and then going off at that tangent, then coming back again, then making a joke, and then being poignant and flippant. All of that we've tried to keep. We wanted the integrity of Freddie to come through, so that anybody that had ever seen him interviewed or heard him in conversation would think, God, this book is very accurate and it's very faithful in that regard. So for Roger to confirm it was great.
Yeah, that is great. So you guys have done a great job archiving the life of Farouk Balsara, and when he turned into Freddie Mercury, it looks like that you guys captured him very well. Anything else that you guys would like to add to the interview at this particular point? One of the great quotes that one of the people here found in the book, it says, "I'm playing my role in history, looking to find my goal, taking in all this misery, but giving it all my soul, made in heaven. It was all meant to be." That is a great, great quote. Anything else you guys like to add this morning as you're broadcasting into Midwest America here today?
Okay, well, I would say that for anybody that knows an awful lot about Freddie Mercury, or whom knows very, very little but wants to know more, I know I'm bound to say it, but this is the book for you. If you want to get into the details of the man's life and his mind, and you want to see what's behind the man and what made him think and how he arrived at the points that he arrived at, it's all there. It might be all here, there, and everywhere. I think you do need to read the whole book to get a very balanced view. But in various ways, it's all there somewhere. And like I said earlier, it might not necessarily be that everything is there on the page, but it's between the lines. If you stop and think about what he's just said, I think everybody could learn a lot more about Freddie than they currently know.
And if I can just add to that, I think throughout the whole of Queen history, their relationship with the American fans has been so important and special to them. They loved coming over to America and traveling the whole country and performing, and we've seen that even after Freddie with their collaboration with Paul Rodgers and now with Adam Lambert, where they're regularly touring North America. It's that's a really special bond, I think, and I'd like to think that Freddie would be thrilled that people in America still think he's relevant and still a fascination, and that they love his music. So hopefully they'll embrace the book as well and keep that icon carrying on into future generations.
As far as I'm concerned, the greatest frontman in rock history. Guys, tell us where we can tell us.
I don't think we'd argue with that.
Yeah, maybe Robert Plant, but I got to lean toward Freddie Mercury there. But guys, tell us where we can find the book now.
The book is available as you can either purchase it as a paperback, or if you've got a Kindle, you can have it as an ebook through Amazon.com.
Okay, very good, gentlemen. Thank you very. Yes, go ahead.
So I was just going to add that we are looking to bring it to Audible at some point, and also some point soon, and also people that speak or read Spanish or French or Italian. Italian is already available, but we're looking to offer the book very soon in French and Spanish so that everybody has a chance to read it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been a great interview. I really appreciate your time today and talking to us here in Midwestern America. I've been captured by the book. The book is now holding me hostage until I'm done. So you've done a great job with that.
That's very kind of you.
It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, take care.
It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure. You guys have a great
All the
day.
best.